Okay, so Monster Hunter is the latest video game to screen adaptation by Paul W.S. Anderson. Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with P.T. Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson. Paul Thomas Anderson is the guy who made There Will Be Blood and Punch Drunk Love and Phantom Thread. And Paul W.S. Anderson is the guy who started out making Shopping, then, which was a kind of indie, a kind of controversial hit actually when it first came out, small budget film. Then he made Mortal Kombat, not the new Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat, which I quite liked and did very well. Then he made Event Horizon, which is a film which Jason Isaacs is in, which we never saw in a director's cut. It was kind of slightly, they had to rush it at the very end, but it's I think a really good, interesting science fiction film. But then settled down to basically doing video game adaptations, usually starring Mila Jovovich, who is his partner. So he did the Resident Evil series. I think he directed 4 of the 6, and he wrote the other 2. And between them, those movies have taken like over $1 billion. So Paul Thomas Anderson, accolades, great reviews. Paul W.S. Anderson, none of the above, but huge success. Box office. So this is the story is Mila Jovovich's character is transported via a mysterious sandstorm into another world, which is full of monsters. There she meets Tony Jaa, who's a monster hunter. He's called Hunter. And then there's also Ron Perlman, who is the Admiral, who's worrying about the connection between the two worlds because there's some plot thing about when the two worlds meet, that's how the bad thing happens. But none of that matters. Essentially, it's called Monster Hunter, and most of the film is hunting monsters. And the monsters are well rendered. There's a kind of quite enthusiastic score. And there are lots of monster scenes. There isn't anything else. And one of the things that's peculiar about it is the film makes narratively very, very little sense. And people tend to say, oh, it makes narratively little sense because it's based on a video game. That's nonsense, okay? I don't know much about video games, but I know that narratively they make sense because otherwise people wouldn't play them. In fact, the narratives for most video games are extremely complicated and, and tied up. So it was one of those things when I thought, it would be really brilliant to be able to be, hey, the critic who says, wow, everyone, all the critics are down on these films, but they're great. It isn't great. It's not. It's very, very clunky. And I think the problem with it is that I think people who love the game will be disappointed because it's nothing like like I said, I think it doesn't make any sense in the way that the game probably does. And people who don't know the game will probably spend a lot of it doing what I did, which is, what? Okay, all right, fine. And not really worrying about it. So it is a series of special effects sequences. Mila Jovovich is great. I mean, she's a kind of proper action hero, and she's earned the right to front any action franchise she chooses. She deserves, I think, a better film than this. It's pretty ropey, but it's Monster Hunter. They hunt monsters.